to Dover Road. Continue for 1.5 miles. In 300 yards. yards. Keep right to continue towards Tons Lane, A355.
I think there'll be many people who would argue that they are now paying the price of having indulged in it for too long.
Back to the Prime Minister and the energy price rise storm awaiting in just a few months' time. Quizzed by that yesterday at the Downing.
Keep right.
By the Sun's political editor, Paddy Cole. Will he cut VAT on fuel bills?
The argument, as you know, is that it's a bit of a blunt instrument, and the difficulty is that you end up also cutting fuel bills for a lot of people who perhaps don't need the support.
Plus, we cross the channel as Emmanuel Macron, with his popularity dipping, and of course not that far off an election, says that he wants to end the anti-vaxxers. He picks a different word. It's rather rude. I can only say it once. You'll hear it later in the hour with, of course, due warning.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
No, it's not that way. It's something off. Okay, so it's a two-word expression from Monsieur Macron, who's hearing me. I think I'd much rather have Boris Johnson's enthusiasm rather than the rather sneering, nasty tone from Monsieur Macron. So the second word is off. No, it's not that one. No, it's something. No, it's not that one. I can only say it once, and it's about, I don't know, we're about half an hour away from that, roughly. Yeah, about 30 minutes' time. I'll tell you what it is. Monsieur Macron, not, I would suggest, the way to entice people.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto the M4 slip road to London, Heathrow Airport.
Look at some of the data. It does seem to support it. I've already said intensive care admissions, half that of the peak 12 months ago, just 5% on ventilators. Of course, that's important, and we wish them all the best. Travel tests set to be ranked today, and then if you look at the stock markets or the bourses across the world, travel and leisure shares are surging, as it seems. Just about every medical authority on the planet agrees Omicron, while important, is nothing like as severe as the first waves. Details now, OBC's political editor, Theo Ashworth.
Boris Johnson convenes his cabinet in the next 90 minutes or so. At one point just before Christmas, it was expected that by the time we reached now, he would be introducing further lockdown restrictions to stem the spread of Omicron. But at yesterday's Downing Street press conference, the Prime Minister was adamant that the country can ride out this latest surge of COVID.
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
Introduced before Christmas, we have a chance to ride out this Omicron wave without shutting down our country once again. We can keep our schools and our businesses open, and we can find a way to live with this virus.
Now, that decision came as the country recorded more than 218,000 new cases in a day. That's a record. Meanwhile, there are currently more than 15,000 people in hospital with COVID. That's double the number of Christmas, but still well below the peak, Nick, of both the first and the second waves of this virus. Of course, one big problem is that many employers whose work is essential to keeping the country moving are facing significant staff shortages. In response,
Continue on M4 for 9 miles.
Daily lateral flow tests from next week.
We've identified 100,000 critical workers in areas from food processing to transport to our border force. And from the 10th of January, we'll be lateral flow testing for all these workers available on every working day.
Now, we know the NHS has been hit particularly hard. More than 50,000 staff off sick with COVID, and some suspected heart and stroke victims have reportedly been told to take a taxi to hospital because there are no ambulances available. David Probert is Chief Executive of University College London Hospitals.
We were increasingly worried before the new year, and now at the beginning of January we're seeing some very, very early signs that perhaps some of that demand is lessening, but I would caution against thinking we are through the worst of this pandemic and worst of this stage. We have a long way to go in January, so we're really planning very much for the worst and hoping for the best.
Back to the Downing Street press conference, and Boris Johnson said that the vast majority of those in hospital, especially those on ventilators and in ICU, had not been vaccinated. And Professor Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, was asked by our colleague Ben Kentish whether those individuals were staunch anti-vaxxers. And this was the interesting response from Professor Whitty.
My experience of having talked to people in that situation is I'm rather saddened, because the great majority of them, they're not anti-vaxxers in the ordinary sense with some really weird ideas. This is where the misinformation there is around on the internet, a lot of it deliberately placed, is a problem. It is, they worry about side effects, and that's understandable, and it is the job of health professionals not to get frustrated by that, but simply to say, look, let's go through all of your questions properly and systematically and say, which ones are fair and which ones, as in many cases, are really completely untrue, but have been put into the public domain, often deliberately to scare people.
Sir Chris Whitty concluding Theo Ushel's report. The idea of public support for riding it out. We'll be speaking with a public affairs consultant and expert, James Ford, in a moment. Let's get to the medical side of this. Gareth Emerson was, until relatively recently, Chief Executive of the London Ambulance Service. Now, I don't need to say that's obviously the biggest ambulance service in the country, and will now comment on the idea that in some instances people are being, it is reported, suggested they need to get into taxis. In the reality, Mr. Emerson, thank you for coming on the show. The reality, you can't suddenly just buy extra ambulances and indeed train the personnel to drive them. So I suppose there is something to what the PM is suggesting. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes. Fantastic. So, I mean,
We're having a problem there, Garrett. If you can hear me, we can't hear you. So let's try and get you what's called a phone line, which often work quite well. That's why they were invented. James Ford is a public affairs consultant who was previously an advisor to Boris Johnson while he was Mayor of London. Is this the usual sort of booster enthusiasm that we're used to from Boris Johnson? And will the message resonate with the public? James, good morning.
Good morning. I certainly think some of Boris's normal enthusiasm has come through. There's obviously some very important politics behind this, as it will always be when a Prime Minister is making major national decisions. And it'll also be tinged to some extent with personal experience as well. Lest we forget that Boris himself was hospitalised with COVID during the first wave.
Noting that you worked closely with the Prime Minister when he was Mayor of London, if he is in a corner, as he has been, one has to be honest, over the last few weeks of December, how does he normally react? Does he become determined to fight a way through? Does he become a little withdrawn? What happens to the Prime Minister at times such as those?
Well, based on my own experience, he tends to take public criticism quite personally. He can be thin-skinned at times, but he soldiers on.
The fact that England differs so radically, James, from what we see in Scotland, what we see in Wales, what do you imagine the Prime Minister is trying to achieve there? Or is this just a happy accident or accident of fate?
Well, I think it's more the latter, the sort of cynical England versus the rest type approach. England has taken a different path several times during the pandemic. Certainly there has been political differences over approach, particularly between England and Wales, where the Welsh approach has been quite draconian, and there has been briefing from the government against that approach. And obviously Keir Starmer faced some tough questions yesterday when he was making a keynote speech, and he was asked whether or not he supported Welsh-type measures in England, and if he didn't, did he therefore think they were excessive in Wales? So I think there's some clear politics at play, but that probably isn't part of the Prime Minister's strategy on this approach. I think he's wanting to allow his sort of freedom-loving libertarian side to shine through, but it seems to be backed up by the science so far.
Public affairs consultant James Ford, who worked with Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London. Thank you for your time. Let's try again now, 7:12. Gareth Emerson, who was until very recently the Chief Executive of the London Ambulance Service. Talk about some of the pressures then that the LAS, your former colleagues, might be under at this time. And of course you can't just suddenly, as I was saying earlier, magic more ambulance crews, can you? Good morning again, Gareth.
Good morning, Nick. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you now, sir.
Well, I think it's not just London, it's actually the whole country that's been under huge pressure, really going back to the sort of latter part of the summer. If you look at all of the NHS statistics, they've broken all records of demand for 999 calls. And it's not necessarily been about calls related to the pandemic, it's been about a surge in demand across a whole range of calls. And you're right, you can't just magically generate more paramedics overnight. It takes several years to train and fully qualify a paramedic to work solo on an ambulance. So all services have been struggling, even though they've been recruiting record numbers and the government's making money available to do that. And of course it's not only about ambulance crews themselves, it's also about pressures on the control centres and answering the calls and making sure that they can correctly assess them and prioritise the most in need to get the ambulances to them fast. So we've seen mounting pressure, and of course now, although you've just been hearing the Omicron variant of the virus is perhaps leading to less people ending up in hospital than in the earlier phases, what it's not any different to is the number of people potentially who are off sick or whatever, they might be at home with the virus and might be in hospital. What's that?
In 200 yards, keep right at the fork. Follow signs for M3, M23. Keep right at the fork.
I'm old enough to remember, and respectfully you probably are too, indeed you might.
Continue on M25 south for 1.5 miles.
Before we had the pandemic and before we had COVID, about the incredible abuse that people had of the London ambulance service, people ringing up. I remember someone once saying that they had an ingrained toenail, could you send an ambulance? And someone else was another, I think my son's in the pub, could you check he's all right? And these were very powerful campaigns that went out. Is there still a level of abuse, do you think, even now, Gareth?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that the vast majority of members of the public who ring and call to 999 are doing so because they absolutely are in need or believe they're in need of an ambulance and potentially life-threatening situation. So I think what all ambulance services would say, please only call if you believe that you have a life-threatening situation. And then it's the best thing is for the skilled people in the control centres and the call centres can assess those needs, and they're having to make some very tough decisions.
Indeed. Good to get you on the phone. Good to hear from you again, Gareth Emerson. Thank you. You served until last year as Chief Executive of the London Ambulance Service. Now, here, and appreciating now, you're just as lucky to be listening to LBC in Lowestoft, or Liskeard as you are, or Lancaster as you are in London. I understand that now.
In half a mile, at junction 14, use the left 2 lanes to take the A3113 exit to Heathrow Airport.
So that sadly means that in other counties or other cities you're possibly 2 weeks away, but you can ride this peak, so you can ride this storm, you can ride it out. We'll take your views on that. I say again, we'll stop.
Use the left 2 lanes to exit at junction 14, then keep right.
A man accused of murdering a mother and 3 children is ordered by a judge to undergo a brain
Keep right.
LBC's Kate Baldock in Derbyshire with the latest.
Plus, let's cross the channel to an increasingly rattled Emmanuel Macron.
French President Emmanuel Macron has used extremely strong language to attack anti-vaxxers, saying he will hassle them until they get their coronavirus jabs. I'm Pichal, reporting for LBC in Paris.
I'm sorry, it's a very important story, but it's interesting how the media have all agreed that we're going to use the word hassle. It's not hassle, it's something.
In a 1/4 mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto Airport Way, A3113.
7:16 now, LBC News headlines, Simon Conway.
After saying he wants to ride out the Omicron wave, the Prime Minister will tell his cabinet later that there'll be no further COVID restrictions in England. New research has found more than 80% of people have seen their living costs rise in the past few months. A memorial dedicated to the victims of the Manchester Arena terror attack will officially open to the public later. LBC weather dry and cold with sunny spells for many, a high of 8 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne. We're very slow on the M25, anti-clockwise, just after junction 27 at the M11, and that's where a car has broken down, so one lane is closed for recovery. In Lewisham, busy on the A20 Low-Pit Vale both ways following an accident. In Richmond, the quadrant remains closed northbound between the Square and Richmond Circus, and that's because of a burst water main. On the trains, because of the ongoing shortage of staff, Gatwick Express services are running throughout today. Also, no southern services going to and from Victoria for the rest of the week, and most of the other train companies are running
in a 1/4 mile, at the roundabout, take the second exit onto Southern Perimeter Road.
between Upminster and Whitechapel.
LBC.
What are your 2022 business goals? Data security? Minimizing downtime? Dell Technologies can help you achieve every goal during our New Year event. From transforming digital workspaces to providing comprehensive end-to-end IT solutions. Find the latest high-performance PCs with powerful hardware-based security. Dell Technologies recommends Windows 11 Pro for business. Chat with a Dell Technologies advisor at dell.co.uk or call 0800 085 4878.
Call Nick Ferrari now, 0345.
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road.
News LBC.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nikki Kanani, GP and Medical Director of Primary Care.
In 200 yards, at Western Perimeter Road roundabout, take the second exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
COVID-19 vaccine. Vaccines give your children the best possible protection against the virus. Get your 12 to 15-year-old vaccinated before term, or as soon as it's been 12 weeks after their first dose. Book online or find your nearest walk-in centre.
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road. Continue on Southern Perimeter Road for 1.5 miles.
Okay, so ideal advances. Precision you can see. Available at Boots Opticians.
It could be that same numbers are dreaming type. It could be leaving it to fate with a lucky tip. It could be you. Don't miss tonight's Lotto Double Ring. Play on app, online and in-store. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
A few too many. Lots of us are feeling it. Those extra pounds adding extra strain to our bodies. Now's the time to get things started, one way or another. To shop smarter, eat better, and move more. Getting started is easier than you think. For free tips and tools to lose weight, search Better Health. Let's do this.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
Writing it out and take your views on that in just a moment. Let me quickly run you through the front pages of the newspapers, some of which pick up on that positive tone, I have to say. The Daily Express, no shutdown, Boris. We can ride out Omicron surge. The Metro as well, of course. Bear in mind that's a hugely read newspaper. PM, we can ride it out, already referenced. And the Financial Times picks up on the fact that travel and leisure shares have surged. Investors focus on lower stability, increase in investments there, so that is to be welcomed as well. Testing rules to be relaxed to solve scarf shortages is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. We can ride the wave is the front page of the Sun. There we are, despite cases hitting a record 218,000. I say again, and of course, and I wish you nothing but a speedy recovery, it is not as severe as the earlier variants. In London, it would appear we're over the hump. I appreciate you could be listening in Lancaster. That doesn't mean a lot, or indeed Leicester. God bless it. But it does mean that you will get through it. And there's the Times. PM, we can ride this out without new COVID curbs. The less positive tone for the Guardian, perhaps not surprisingly. Johnson admits NHS could be overwhelmed in coming weeks. The Daily Mirror, heart attack, get a lift to A&E, which is a rather brutal way of characterising what we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday. For the I newspaper, daily tests for key workers as PM sticks with Plan B, as Theo Usherwood said in his report.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Beacon Road.
We would be going up the scale, but he's held on to that. Cabinet meeting in a little over an hour's time. Our political editor will be there shouting questions from the fence. Whether he gets any answers remains to be seen. The last front page is the Daily Mail. They're going with the row over Tony Blair getting his K, as it's called, his knighthood. Ex-Minister Blair's aide told me to burn Iraq war evidence. This is the Defence Secretary, the then Defence Secretary, I need to say, Jeff Hoon, claiming he was ordered by Downing Street to burn a secret memo that said the two...
Exit the roundabout onto Beacon Road.
With obviously the UK...
In 100 yards, at the roundabout, take the second exit onto Stanwell Road.
In 2015, this claim, when Mr. Hoon wrote a book. It was rubbish then, and it is being told that it was absolute nonsense now, but I will put it...
Exit the roundabout onto Stanwell Road. Continue on Stanwell Road for half a mile.
About Tony Blair getting his knighthood, and of course Boris Johnson, indeed, because it is the sort of process that once Prime Ministers have done their term, they get their knighthood, or of course, in the case of Margaret Thatcher, they become a baroness. But of course it has been delayed for some 14 years, I think, because of Tony Blair, probably over the controversy over Iraq. All right, so we'll come to riding it through in just a moment. Kim, I'll talk to you in just a moment, Kim, so don't move an inch, but I have got a call in to the United States to reflect on what is what's called the second lead for most of the newspapers. That's the second most prominent story, which of course is events in the New York courthouse. Let's hear a little. This is Prince Andrew. A lot of this could turn on Prince Andrew from that famous Newsnight interview. Over 2 years ago now, my word. Where was he on the day he was accused of, he's always denied, having sexual relationships with Virginia Roberts Giuffre?
On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then because the Duchess was away, we have a simple rule.
In 200 yards, turn right onto Hatton Road.
The other one's there. I was on terminal leave at the time from the Royal Navy, so therefore I was at home.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking...
Turn right onto Hatton Road, then turn left onto Staines Road.
It certainly is, sir. And no one in Woking appears to have any... I'm not disputing your word for a moment, Your Highness. But no one in Woking seems to remember. Now, when you imagine, you just thought the wait staff, someone would say, oh yeah, I remember, Prince Andrew wanted a red hot margarita or whatever. I don't really have whatever he has, I don't know, an American hot one, I don't know what they're called. Don't go to Pizza Hut. Or Pizza Express, I'm sorry. None of the staff seem to have any recollection. Not, of course, that I'm disputing, but will we see the Duke of York testifying in the courthouse in New York? Let's get some legal expertise on this, joined by Deborah Blum, who's...
Turn left onto Staines Road, A315.
Sexual offences and has helped us with this case. OK, let me fill you in with some of the headlines this side of the water then. It's pretty gloomy, I have to tell you, Deborah. Judge deals blow to Prince's hopes of stopping sexual assault lawsuit is the Daily Express.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, continue straight to stay on Staines Road, A315.
Blow for Andrew is the Daily Mirror. How do you interpret it, Deborah? Morning.
I would say that all of those are pretty accurate. He does have a little hope because the judge didn't rule. He didn't say the case is going forward. But the things that he said during the attorney's oral arguments would lean towards this matter is proceeding.
When might we know?
The judge said that he was going to make his decision very soon, which means it's likely in the next week or so. It could be the next couple of days. I would say no longer than 2 weeks.
What can you tell us?
Less.
Pardon me. What could you tell us about the...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, continue straight to stay on Staines Road, A315.
Have different viewpoints on sitting justices. I believe that this one is acting very straightforward and is doing his best to lead this case in a very public matter, and that always causes strain for the sitting judge.
And if Judge Lewis Kaplan says the case must proceed, can you talk us through the mechanics, and is there a further appeal allowed to the Duke, or is that it?
Well, generally an appeal is not done until a case is over. In certain circumstances, you can appeal during the pendency of the case, but that traditionally is not common. It's way more common to just appeal after the matter, but you know, he has a massive legal team. I'm sure they're going to try anything possible to get this from going forward. If it does continue forward, let's say appeal is or is not filed, it generally would proceed anyway, and we're going to have a massive discovery exchange. The clips that we just listened to, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like for the prince that he can verify any of the claims that he said in his interview.
Deborah, thanks. I sense we'll be talking again. Deborah Blum in New York, an attorney acting for victims and those accused of sexual offences. Let's come back to matters in the UK. Did I tell you the time? 7:28. Well, I have now. And the idea that we can ride it out. Kim and Taunton, how do you respond to the Prime Minister's message? I'm rather uplifted by it. Good morning.
I haven't heard the latest, but I phoned in and spoke with Matt Wright on the 28th.
Right.
I said that I felt that, you know, Boris is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't.
And what did you mean? What did you mean by that?
Well, at the time it was a discussion about was it right that we weren't in lockdown, and I feel that, you know, how do I know? All I can say is I keep myself safe, and I think everybody else has got to do the same.
Well, of course, keeping yourself safe is having those vaccines.
In 300 yards, turn right onto Shaftesbury Avenue.
Whether everyone's doing that.
Well, exactly. I mean, I've had mine. I mean, each individual person has to look after themselves. I mean, the notion that Boris is guiding us in everything we do is rubbish. You know, quite honestly. And if we were in lockdown, we'd be having a different discussion about, oh, should he have done that?
Take the next right onto Shaftesbury Avenue, then turn left onto Roslin Avenue.
Honesty, and particularly when you see And this is not just me, this is medical experts across the globe saying that Omicron is not as severe. Kim, thank you for that. More calls coming in. I'll try and get to those, the other side of the news. And also, coming up, après le news.
French President Emmanuel